I have 3 objects on the screen that I want to animate. And I want to animate one so that it's rotating, one so that it's moving, and the third object I want to rotate so that animate so that it's rescaling. So if I want to animate something, I need to see the timeline, and the timeline is down in here. So if I move my mouse to this dark line between the grid and the timeline, I can make this bigger so I can see it. I don't need to make it real big for myself, but for you, I'm kind of making this a little bit bigger to see it. So the first thing I want to do is move something. I'm going to move this sphere. I'm going to move it forward. It's going to stay there for a second and move it back. Now on this timeline, there's 250 frames. In fact, it says at the end there's 250 frames. You can change that, but right now we're not going to change that. We're going to leave that as it is. But I want to I want you to know that there's 30 frames per second. So at the 30 mark, that would be 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and so on. To animate, you need to use, there are frames inside here. So on frame 1, that's where my circle, my sphere is sitting, and I want it to sit there. So all I'm going to impact here is the location. I'm going to move it from here to forward and back. So if I'm just impacting the location, I want to right click on my sphere, insert a keyframe. But it asks you what kind of keyframe you want to set. And there's a whole bunch: location, rotation, scale, both location and rotation. You just have to consider what your object is going to be doing. In this case, we're just moving its location. So I'm going to go ahead and select location, and it adds a yellow keyframe there. So I'm going to have it sit there for 60 frames. And on frame 60, I want it to be here. So I moved my sphere, and now I want to set its keyframe. So I'm going to right click on it, insert keyframe, and again all I'm doing is impacting location. At this point, I can test it out and see if it's moving. So on frame 1, that's its starting point. It has a yellow dot there. By frame 60, I want it to be all the way over here, pulled in the front. So it is doing what I want it to do over a period of 60 frames. If I don't like how long it moves, I can take this keyframe and I can drag it. I want it to be 50 frames. Now because it uses less frames, it moves just a little bit faster. It's hardly noticeable, but it's moving. So now I want it to sit there for about 1 second. So I know that 1 second is 30 frames. So from 50 to 80, that's about my second. And I don't want it to move anywhere. So I just want it to stay there. On frame 80, it should still be there. So I'm going to insert a keyframe, hit location. And to show me that it's staying in one spot, it gives me this gold bar here. Now I know that it's not moving between 50 and 80. But I do want it to move one more time. I want it to move back to its original position. So I'm taking my playhead and I'm moving it to about 130. You can estimate. It can be anywhere else if you're following along. I want to move it to where it started, about where it started. And again, I right click, insert keyframe, and set the location. Again, there's no gold bar because this time it's moving. So if I play it all together, my animation moves, it sits, and it moves it back. It returns back to its original spot. I'm going to do something very similar to the square. My cube here, I want it to resize. I want it to get bigger and smaller. And so I don't want it to start on frame 1 though. So I'm going to start it on frame 60 and I'm going to set its position. So I like the way it is. This time I'm messing with the scale of it. So I'm setting that as its starting point. I'm going to drag this out, drag my playhead out to where I want it to change to get bigger or smaller. And I'm going to change its size. And I'm going to set, so insert, right click, insert keyframe, set the scale. So now I have an object that is getting bigger. Again, I want it to stay just that size for a little bit longer. So I'm going to come out here a little bit more with my playhead to 140, insert keyframe, impact my scale. Oh, I didn't want to change it at all. So now it doesn't move. I have the gold bar to say it's not moving. And one more move of my playhead, change what I want it to look like, kind of back to where it was, and set my scale again. So now I have an object moving and an object resizing. Lastly, I want an object rotating. So if I click on this cone, all of my keyframes went away because it is its own object. If I click back on my cube, all of the keyframes are there. Again, I can move them around. I can even delete them. If I click on a keyframe, I made a mistake, I don't want it there anymore, I can click on a keyframe and hit delete, which changes my whole animation. So I did an undo, which is Control-Z to bring me back. Refocusing back on the green cone, I want it to rotate. I'm going to start it rotating right around 120. So I brought my playhead to 120. I'm going to right click, insert keyframe. I'm going to be moving its rotation, so I'm going to select rotation and set its starting point. I'm going to drag this all the way to 220 this time. I only want 2 keyframes. And this time I want to be on my rotation tool because I want it to rotate a full spin from beginning to end, and set its rotation. So insert keyframe rotation. And I just want to test it out. And now I have that cone making a full rotation.